Welcome to SBC PTI with RN and Nick. Our first topic is going to be which NFL coach is under the most pressure heading into the 2023 season?
I think that's an easy one for me. I think it's Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers are under the most pressure to win this year. You look at what happened to them each of the past 2 years, under the first 2 years of Brandon Staley. Year one, they were very competitive, but they did lose in that final game of the regular season to the Raiders in overtime. And then last year, we all know what happened. They were up 27-0 in the first half of the game against the Jaguars in the playoffs, and they ended up blowing that game. So what I know is that if the Chargers don't take a step forward this year, then that means Brandon Staley's gone. And another thing, too, is that Brandon Staley now has his defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator that he likes. Derek Ansley is in his defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore offensive coordinator. So he's got the guy he likes. So now it's on Brandon Staley, and if it goes wrong, it's Brandon Staley's fault.
Those are very good points right there, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I'm going to go with Mike McCarthy, and I think that's a fairly obvious choice if he's probably one of the most under pressure coaches heading into the season. I mean, you look at the last two seasons, back-to-back 12-5 seasons, 12-win seasons, back-to-back playoff appearances for the Cowboys, something they haven't done since, the early 90s. And if they make the playoffs again this year, it'll be even farther when they haven't made it 3 straight years in a row. But, 2021, they had such high expectations, and then they lose that home game against the 49ers with that horrendous last play with the whole Dak QB sneak with 14 seconds and no timeouts. And then last season, you take a step forward. He wins one playoff game against the Buccaneers and Tom Brady on the road, which is impressive. But then, you lose against the same team 2 years in a row against the 49ers once again in San Francisco this time. Also on an even more horrendous play with Ezekiel Elliott at center for whatever bizarre reason Kellen Moore cooked that play up out of space. But I think it's fairly obvious that Mike McCarthy, if he doesn't take the Cowboys, especially now that he's the offensive play caller with Kellen Moore out, all the pressure is on him now, especially since he hasn't called plays since he was the Packers, head coach 5 years ago. I think if he doesn't make a deep playoff run this season, he's out, and Jerry probably promotes Dan Quinn as head coach.
Well, you did bring up a great point that both Mike McCarthy and Brandon Staley, they have the guys they want now. So they're going to go down their way. It's going to be no other way. But you also did mention the Cowboys got a playoff win last year. How many did Brandon Staley have? 0. And not to mention, Brandon Staley, along with Kellen Moore, has Justin Herbert, which this is no knock on Dak. Dak is a really good quarterback. Justin Herbert is different than Dak. You have to be able to win with Justin Herbert. If you can win with Justin Herbert, get out. It's as simple as that. You also mentioned the Cowboys are always under pressure. Well, guess what? Jason Garrett was under pressure for a decade, and he stayed that whole decade. So Jerry Jones doesn't care. Jerry Jones loves his coaches. Mike McCarthy's here for another 5 years, whether you like it or not.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to deal with that because Jerry does cling on to his head coaches a little too much. But now we're going to move on to our next topic in the MLB. And did you agree with the Angels buying at the trade deadline and deciding to keep Shohei and not trade him?
I actually did. I know that's not the popular opinion amongst most baseball fans, but for me, when I thought of it from the perspective of, well, if you trade him, then you're always going to have to sleep with the question every day for the rest of your life, did we really have a chance to keep him? Because if you really had a chance to keep him, you don't trade him. I understand they have been awful since the trade deadline. I think they're winless, actually. But I personally, as someone running the team, I wouldn't want to live with the question, would he have stayed if we kept him? Or as long as we showed him we're trying to win, which is what they did at the deadline. So I agreed with keeping him. Plus, Shohei Ohtani is the only reason the Angels even get fans these days, if we're going to be completely honest with it. Take Shohei off that team, it's another Oakland A's ballpark.
Yeah, that's a good point you brought up with, them living with the decision of, if they keep him or not. I'm going to go with the opposite side of I think they should have dealt him at the trade deadline and allowed him to, go to a winning organization. When you look at the teams that could have potentially traded for him, the big market teams like the Dodgers or the Mets or Yankees, all those teams. I think he would have been better suited for one of those teams to try and win a World Series and not be stuck with, the Poverty Angels. But I mean, maybe when he's a free agent in the winter, he'll go to another team. But we got to wrap this up. Good points by you, Nick. This has been SBC PTI.